Episode 95 of the Fired Coaches podcast. Really excited to get what I feel is a true coaching legend on the men's basketball side here, and Coach Jim Boone. I was just talking to Coach Boone before we started recording here, and I think when I got into coaching around 08, 09, and shortly after that, started seeing all of his stuff from Tusculum and Delta State on the internet with just true organizational skills and what he believed in pack line and different things like that. So Coach Jim Boone is currently at Missouri Valley. NAIA just finished his first season there where they won 18 games, which was the most they had won since the 2014-15 season at Missouri Valley. But he's been all across all divisions, a well-known speaker, clinician, just truly has a great experience within the game of basketball, which obviously we'll dive into your. So Coach Boone, I appreciate you taking some time to sit down on the podcast and chat.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate the kind words. It's certainly an honor and a pleasure for me to be with you today and to share a little bit of our story. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess going back to your playing days, West Virginia State, kind of getting into it, what was kind of the idea? Because, shortly after your playing career, you actually help out at your alma mater. What was the idea kind of getting into it? And what do you remember about those early days, just, kind of coaching guys that, were around the same age as you, just kind of getting into it at the same place you played at?
Exactly. Well, I played for a coach that, great man, really appreciated the opportunity to play for him. And during that time, and actually before I even started college, I knew I wanted to be a basketball coach, but I didn't really know about how to go about it. I knew I wanted to coach in college. So being a part of that and playing for Coach Maxwell, Bob Maxwell was the gentleman I played for, really lit my fire that's just what I wanted to do. I wanted to coach basketball, and I wanted to do it at the college level. But, my parents, when I graduated, they wanted me to go to law school. They wanted me to be a dentist or go to law school or what have you. And because of my degree path, they really pushed the law school avenue. As far as I even went and took the entrance exams, the LSAT, all that, got admitted into 3 different really good schools. And I went and I sat down with my parents. And first of all, my parents were awesome. I was so fortunate and blessed as a young person to have tremendous parents and a tremendous family to lean on. But I sat down and talked to them and said, hey, listen, my passion is coaching. And I can remember my dad looking at me and saying, can you make a living doing that? Can you survive doing that? As I think I can do it, Dad. I think I can do well. Anyway, we made a pact that I would get my master's degree, and if I would do that, they would support me in that in the coaching profession. So, of course, I had a business background, and I was going to get an MBA, but I chose the University of Kentucky because they were close by and they were really good in basketball. And that was the Joe B. Hall days. And, they had some really good teams during those days, Sam Bowie and, to name one that was obviously off the charts and drafted ahead of Michael Jordan in the NBA draft. But to make a long story short, got my MBA and then had an opportunity to come back to my alma mater and, worked as a part-time coach for 1 year with Coach Maxwell, who I'd played for, and then was able to be hired as the full-time assistant under Craig Karsh. Coach Maxwell stepped down just to be the athletic director, and I was hired by Coach Karsh. It was really good. I learned a lot. Coach Karsh, Craig Karsh, taught me a lot about recruiting, a lot of the do's and don'ts and things that you needed to do to recruit kids. That was probably, Marcus, in those days, it's, I'm sure a lot of guys can identify with this. I wasn't great on the phone with kids. I wasn't great sitting down with a family. I didn't really know how to go about that. So that is probably the biggest lesson I took from being an assistant coach with Coach Karsh, was just how to be myself and to sell our program and to do it in an effective, honest, straightforward manner. And so it was really a valuable lesson. And I think more than anything else prepared me to be a head coach from that perspective. And then I had an opportunity because a really good friend of mine who is still coaching down in Florida, Jeff Berghammer, who's also a West Virginia guy. Jeff was the head coach at West Florida for several years, did an unbelievable job there, has done an unbelievable job in his entire career. But we got to be buddies through working camps together. And that's something we all did back in those days that we don't do as much of now. You worked camps in the summer, and the networking that you were able to create in that camp venue was unbelievable. And not to deviate from the story or the question, but, to give you an example about camps, one of the camps that I worked when I was at West Virginia State was the Metro Index Camp that was held on the campus of West Liberty and then California University of Pennsylvania. And when I was at Cal PA working the camp Metro Index, I was still at West Virginia State at the time. My roommate ended up being a young and up and coming high school coach. He just got his first high school coaching job in Rochester, and it was Jeff Van Gundy, who, later obviously went on to coach the Knicks and, what have you. So anyway, those are the kind of contacts you made in working those camps. So got to know Jeff really well, and Jeff had just taken the job at now Charleston Southern University. Then it was called Baptist College in the Division I school in the Big South. And I worked for Tommy Gaither and learned so much about teaching the game of basketball. And, you think you know a lot until you have a chance to be around somebody who's a real pro, and Coach Gaither was an outstanding teacher. So
was that in 85, 86 at Charleston Southern, was that their first year Division I?
I think it was their first year in the Big South.
Okay.
They had been a Division I independent the year before that for a couple, and then
Gotcha.
they went to the Big South. But those two jobs, working at West Virginia State and learning a lot about the recruiting part of it, and then getting the job at Baptist College, Charleston Southern, and learning about just how to be an effective teacher and how to go about teaching in the college game. Those two jobs really prepared me. And then, Marcus, I just, for lack of a better way to say it, I was blindly ambitious. I wanted to be a head coach so bad I couldn't stand it. I felt bad for Coach Gaither, but the best thing about Coach is he was very straightforward and honest with me. There's a couple jobs I brought to his attention and said, hey, I'd really like to go after these jobs. And he was like, don't touch those. Those are not the kind of job that is going to be right for you. You don't want to take those jobs. And then the Cal PA job came open, and it wasn't a great job at that point in time. And but he thought that was a great opportunity for me. He said, I think you can really go in there. You're going to have administrative support. It's going to be a good place for you to start your career. And so he was extremely supportive of me as someone who just was literally eaten up with wanting to be a head coach.
Yeah. Going back to, getting your master's at Kentucky, were you involved in the program there, or were you just kind of hanging around and seeing what was going on? Because I know you mentioned how eager you were to become a coach, but like you said, that deal with your parents of getting the master's, was it just trying to get your head in as much as possible to kind of see, what was going on with Kentucky basketball at that point?
That's a great question. I wrote a ton of letters because that's what you did in those days. You wrote letters and sent, I bet you, 100, 150 Division I coaches. And I only probably got back a handful of those letters. I did not get a letter back from the University of Kentucky, but when I went to to kind of go through the process of deciding if I wanted to go there or not after I'd been accepted, I went to the basketball office and I met Coach Hall. I basically just walked in and said, hello, here's who I am. And I'm going to be going to school here possibly and want to know about a GA opportunity or at least a chance to be around the program. Coach didn't have a GA opportunity available, and he was probably a little leery. He didn't know who I was, but he told me, which was amazing, that you can come and watch practice, watch workouts, do whatever you want for the entire year. And so for that year, I bet you I might have missed 5 practices at most, watching that team practice and prepare for the whole That was 81, 82 season. So what an unbelievable experience that was, watching their staff. Leonard Hamilton was a part of that staff, and great teacher, great recruiter. Now, he wasn't around a lot because in those days, you sent your staff out recruiting, and he was one of the guys who was on the road quite a bit. But tremendous staff and great opportunity for me to be a part of that and watch that, even to do it from the stands as I did. It was tremendous. I had a ton of great notes that I took on all their practices, and that's what I did on a daily basis, and got to see a lot of the games. I ended up obviously befriending a couple of guys on the team and was able to get tickets to all the home games in a pretty good lower part of Rupp Arena to watch all those. So to be able to see what they worked on during the week and how they prepared, and to see that unfold in the game and the adjustments that they were able to make during the course of the game, was an invaluable experience for me. Again, trying to make those steps forward in becoming a head coach. So obviously, yeah, I loved that time that I was there. One of the reasons I chose that is you only had to, their MBA program was a 1-year program. A lot of MBA programs in those times were 2 years, but I took that. And so I finished it going summer to summer. And basically, Marcus, all I did was play basketball in their rec center, go to practice, go to games when I could, and go to school. So, it was a good year. I enjoyed it.
No, that sounds like a good plan. You mentioned Cal U in Pennsylvania, a Division II program that you had gotten that job, and honestly, a handful of years, right? You're really out of the game, and between doing your master's and working at West Virginia State, and then down at Baptist College or Charleston Southern now, and you get that opportunity. Again, obviously everybody says, right, they think they're more prepared than they were stepping in there, but how prepared really did you feel taking that first head job at Cal U in Pennsylvania?
Well, I was extremely fortunate. First of all, the job came open late. And this is another reason why Coach Gaither was extremely supportive of me. I didn't take the job till November 1st. And so a lot of people were probably eliminated from contention because they couldn't leave their programs. And there were some major Division I coaches that were involved. They were involved in the job, but they withdrew because of the timing involved. And so I was very fortunate because of the timing involved. And then I walked into a situation where they wanted me to keep the staff because of how late it was in the year. And I had an assistant coach who had served as a part-time assistant who really wanted the job. And, rule number one in taking a job it used to be, don't take the guy who wanted the job, who applied for the job. That's not a good thing to do. And then the GA was Dave Pilipovich, who you've had on your podcast. And man, I lucked out. Phil Stewart was the part-time assistant who I ended up hiring as a full-time assistant. Just did a great job for us. Tremendous person, great family, and have been lifelong friends with the Stewarts. And then obviously Dave's one of the best I've ever been around. I mean, he was the assistant coach that I've ever had. It's just so diligent, so no stone goes unturned, kind of a person, and very organized and very disciplined in his approach. So I was really fortunate. The second part of that equation was I had a president and I had a vice president and a dean of student development that were all in concert with one another, allowed me to present my vision and lay it out and then build to that vision, and were extremely supportive. Because when I took the job, at that point in time, Division II allowed 12 scholarships. We had 4.
Wow.
In a league that was really good, where most people were operating with 10 or 12. We had 4. Our budget was next to nothing. We had 0 equipment. Our gym was just okay. Hamer Hall, the floor was dingy. The backboards were all wooden on the sides. You had glass on the main court, and that was it. The lighting was horrific. The first game I coached, I told you, took the job November 1st. We played like November 16 or 17. And I walk out of the tunnel and there's like 150 people there, maybe. There's just zero support. And, our last 5 years, we sold out every game. But just some of the things, we went from 4 scholarships incrementally through a couple, 3, 4 years to get to 12, and then the NCAA cut it back to 10. We instituted a summer program. We were redshirting players and keeping them for 5 years. We revamped the entire gymnasium with new lighting, new floor, new backboards all the way around, new paint. We were just able to accomplish a lot. And the only reason that I was able to do that was because of the support I had from our president, our vice president, and our dean of student development. Those people were so instrumental. I was so blessed to have that kind of support as a young coach. And I was afforded the opportunity to make some mistakes, because I guarantee you, we probably lost some games we shouldn't have lost. Now, we won a lot of games at Cal, so we were pretty good. But, I was able to make some mistakes, and then to have an older coach on our staff like Phil, who was able to help keep me grounded as a younger, more emotional coach, was really good as well. It was just a perfect storm and perfect situation for me. And frankly, Marcus, probably should have stayed there. It was, we had built something really special. We were a national power. We were ranked in the top 10 every year. We had built a real family atmosphere around the program. We had our former players coming back constantly to be a part of what we were doing. We had a unbelievable team camp we had started that was rolling in teams from all over Western Pennsylvania and Ohio, West Virginia. So it was really a thriving, great situation. I turned down a couple of Division I opportunities, and then actually Robert Morris became available. I turned it down the first time, and their athletic director, Bruce Corey, kept hammering away, and he eventually won out, and I took that job. But a lot of me taking that job had to do with the fact it was right up the road. So, it's.
I was gonna ask that with your alignment in Pennsylvania there. I mean, obviously, again, being 10 years at Cal U, I mean, you're in the Hall of Fame there. 91, 92, you guys go 31-2. Obviously, you mentioned all the success, 6 NCAA tournaments, couple Final Fours. Before we get into Robert Morris, at what point did you feel, like you said, you were afforded some mistakes? You're talking about what the facility looked like and the lack of support when you first got there and have a couple weeks to your first game. At what point did you really feel like things are turning here for the good?
Well, I thought there were a couple things with that too, and that's a great question, Marcus. Thanks for asking. I inherited a much better situation than what the outside world saw. The previous staff had done a great job of recruiting. Tim Loomis had been the head coach there. He had done a really good job. And we inherited a couple of guys who he had gotten for basically nothing to come to school. A young man named Daryl Norfleet from Philadelphia, and Dana Zychek from the Pittsburgh area. And then you threw in a couple guys that were there, and Joe Miller, who ended up being one of the all-time rebounders in school history, and Marshall Kinley, another post player. And we just had the makings of a really good basketball team that really the league or the outside world wasn't aware of. Daryl and Dana both ended up being all-conference guys. Joe was an all-conference guy. So we won a lot our first year. And when you win your first year right off the bat, that obviously gave us a lot of credibility. And then we turned around and won the league and advanced to the Sweet 16 and played Gannon in the Sweet 16 regional final at Gannon that year. And Gannon was a powerhouse in those days. And obviously they're back to winning a lot right now too, as they won a national title this past year. But they were really good. And, we kind of, we had arrived, so to speak. But I think the next couple years is really what taught me the most as a head coach and allowed me to grow. Things just kind of organically happened for us those first couple years. And then all of a sudden now we're in year 3 and we lost all those guys to graduation and we're in a rebuilding process. And, we didn't win we won 17, 18 games, but we weren't winning, the amount of games and competing for a league title those next 2 years like we had. And once we got to year 5, that's just where it really took off. We were good in year 4, should have went to the NCAA tournament. We had a top 20 team, but just missed out because we were upset in the first round of the conference tournament. And so that next year, that team was basically all together again, and they were really hungry because they knew how close they were. And that was the team that ended up going 31-2 and was ranked number 1 in the country the majority of the year. So that's when it really took off. And from that point on, it was just basically just plug and play, man. You're just, bringing in new recruits, and they were working their way up through the system. And we'd have guys that as a junior, they were ready to go. And, because of our success, you didn't have freshmen and sophomores that were transferring because of a lack of playing time, or parents were upset because they weren't playing. They were happy to be there and work their way through the program, and as a junior or senior, be a part of something really special. So it was really, I was blessed to be a part of that situation for the 10 years we were there.
Yeah, like you mentioned, guys, willing to redshirt and sit and see and stick around, like you said, obviously so important. 4 years here at Robert Morris, and again, I don't mean to label you as the rebuilding guy, but it seems like so many programs you've taken where I know the first few years there was 4 wins and 8 wins, and then it's 15 wins and 18 wins, and again, just was it kind of the same philosophy that you're taking to Division I, where you built that, or did you have to tweak some things being at a higher level?
We did. And, the Robert Morris situation, they had something like, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 consecutive losing seasons and had not been very good, and had a history. Matt Virginia, when he was there, longtime Western PA guy, had success in taking them to the NCAA tournament and actually upset somebody in the NCAA tournament. I can't remember who it was right off the top of my head, but he had some really good teams. But we walk into that situation, and you don't truly know what you're getting into until you get there and roll up your sleeves. They wanted to win, but then again, they weren't ready to give you the support to win at the
Kind of like
level.
show me first, and then we'll kind of get behind you a little bit.
Yeah, they just weren't. They just didn't really understand what it was going to take to win at the Division I level in men's basketball at that point in time in the manner that they wanted to win. So we were really fortunate to be able to get a couple things go our way. I thought I was able to maintain our staff. Dave Pilipovich and Glenn Gutierrez both came with me from Cal to be our 2 full-time assistants, and I thought that was huge. Continuity in your coaching staff is so big, particularly in the recruiting world. Those guys did a great job, and we just recruited and recruited and recruited and recruited. In those days, basically, that's all. I mean, the whole month of July, you didn't see your family because you were on the road recruiting, and literally on the road recruiting. And we were also blessed that we had 5-star basketball camp being held right there at Robert Morris. So we had that in our, right there on our campus to recruit from. So with all that going on, we were able to chip away at it, get a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better, so that by the time we got to year 4, we had a really good basketball team. We put together a solid group of people. We had plugged in a couple of junior college guys, and then we were really fortunate that a young man that I had recruited, his brother that grew up and played in West Virginia, ended up blossoming. The younger brother blossomed into an unbelievable high school player and went to LSU and was recruited major college. Well, they changed coaches when Coach Brown retired from LSU, and Coach Brady came in, and he wanted to get his own guys. And so we ended up getting a young man named Gene Neighbors, who was an unbelievable player, and came in, and he took us to the next level. And, Marcus, it's always about your players. Good players make us all a lot better coaches, for sure. And we had really good, solid guys to go along with a really star player. And we had a heck of a year. It was a lot of fun.
I want to ask you this, obviously, because again, you were big on, obviously still to this day, pack line defense and block remover, which you called cutter screener, kind of from Dick Bennett. When did that all kind of, your interest in kind of that all start?
Again, that's a great question. When I was at Cal, we were the old Coach Bennett defense. We the push, as he called
Push
it.
to the baseline.
Yeah, we forced everything baseline. We were on the line, up the line. We denied you for every inch of the floor. We tried to take everything away in the half court we could possibly take away. We were extremely aggressive. We switched all like screens, and we were pretty good at it. But sometimes I felt like at Cal, particularly when we got to the last 4 years, that that our players were able to find ways to win in spite of what we did. You know, in a lot of ways, we were creating offense because the game had changed so much from being an East-West game when we wanted to be so disruptive to being more of a North-South run it, drive it game. And so I knew we were going to have to make some changes. And then when I went to Robert Morris and obviously inherited a tremendous group of young men, the team we inherited, great people, but we were not a very good basketball team. And I knew it was going to be really hard for us to compete in playing the way that we had played at Cal. So that's when we made some major changes. And one of the things I did, frankly, is I called up Coach Bennett. Brad Soderberg was the assistant there at the time, and set up an opportunity to come in and watch them practice. I gave our team, this was year one at Robert Morris, and you couldn't start practice till October 15th. There were no early, practices in those days. So we practiced for a week, and then I gave our team off Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We went Thursday morning at like 6 a.m., and I drove to Madison, and from Pittsburgh to Madison, and I watched practice Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then came back Monday. And so our team got that entire weekend off, and that's when we put in the pack.
Wow.
We were not very good at doing it. We were trying to replicate it as best we could. There's a lot we didn't understand about it that probably went far and above and beyond X's and O's. It's more about culture and philosophy and who you're going to be. But that's when we first instituted pack line defense. And we've basically been running it ever since. We have changed some things in today's world, and particularly with where I'm at now at Missouri Valley, which have been really good for us. I think as a coach, that's, if you're going to be in it for a long time, you've got to learn how to adjust. Our core principles stay the same. Our values stay the same. You got to stay true to who you are as a coach, but you've got to be able to adjust if you're going to be able to adapt in a new world. And certainly this will be my 41st year as a head coach. Yeah, I believe that. Yeah, 41st year as a head coach. So I've had to adjust quite a bit through the years.
Well, kudos to you for, again, not only adapting and changing, which obviously is important. And so many people say they want to do that, right, and be about that. But to actually do it is another thing. But kudos to you starting practice and making that drive and being like, hey, we're going to learn this. We're going to put it in. And there's going to be some pain points and struggles with it. But we're just going to get through it. Because I think that's another thing, too, is obviously you would know a lot better than me. But where it's like you go to do something different, and it's so easy to just like, right, if you're like a man-to-man team and you want to throw in zone because maybe you're not good, great man-to-man, and you throw in zone for 2 minutes and a couple guys hit threes and you're like, we're out of it. We're going back to man. It's so tough to like commit to something different, so I give you credit for doing that. Also, before we talk about Eastern Michigan here, after you had the success at Robert Morris, where did your kind of philosophy or thought process come with, again, like I said, kind of seeing you in my early coaching career with so many handouts and different things of philosophy of what your program was doing. Again, I didn't see anybody else doing that, where, you kind of had, again, to me, it showed organization, but also, hey, here's what I'm doing. And you kind of seemed in some ways like an open book with your clinics and everything. So where did that all kind of start with, just kind of giving back to the game?
It started with Coach Don Meyer. And when I was at Cal, I had reached out to Coach Meyer and asked if I could come and visit with him. And to make a long story short, I ended up driving to Nashville and spent a week with him in the summer when he was running one of his many camps that he did. And he was absolutely tremendous. He shared with me. We had great conversations. We ended up becoming very good friends. One of my good friends in coaching that I went to high school with, Bob Starkey, who is the associate head women's coach at LSU. He and I would make our annual pilgrimage out to Nashville to stay a week with Coach Meyer, or to go to Coach Meyer's fall clinic or his academy in the summer. And so Coach I don't know anybody that gave more back to the game and gave more to coaches, particularly to coaches, than Coach Don Meyer did. And so obviously that rubbed off on me, and it's something that I wanted to also do and emulate and see if I could help in some way and give back to the game as much as I could. I love coaches. I love talking to coaches. I love doing clinics. I love doing things like this when you have a chance to reach out to coaches. Marcus, this is the best profession in the world. I'm so blessed to have been a part of it for as long as I have, and anything we can do to help coaches, we're here to help.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, again, getting into it, it was like, saw your stuff, Don Meyer's, Bob Starkey's blog that he had for the longest time, which he still might have.
Bob's
and then
been tremendous.
Mike Neighbors' newsletter on the women's side. I mean, there's just so many people that were out there that were, kind of pioneers and just really pushing that information out and showing that, hey, there's nothing here to hide or to secure down that it's yours. I mean, share it with the world. So Eastern Michigan, you get the opportunity after having some success, obviously at Robert Morris, turning that program around. What kind of went into taking the job, moving more to the Midwest that way? I know you took Coach Pilipovich with you. John Bowler was on those Eastern Michigan teams. He was on our podcast earlier. So what was kind of the move from Robert Morris to Eastern Michigan for you?
Again, that was a tough one. We had just come off of losing the championship game in the Northeastern Conference Final to Central Connecticut. Game was broadcast on ESPN, and tough loss. And we're getting on the bus to head back to the airport the next morning, and I get a phone call from the AD at Eastern Michigan. And of course, that kind of raises your spirits a little bit, that people recognize what you're doing and see what you're building. And frankly, to his credit, he did a great job of recruiting me to come to Eastern Michigan. I don't want to say anything negative. He was very transparent to a great degree and has been a good friend. But there was so much going on at Eastern Michigan that we just didn't know about. And he didn't know about until you get there and you roll your sleeves up and you realize what you're getting into. And the Mid-American Conference in that day and time was the 9th best league in the country. It was the premier mid-major basketball league in the nation. You had guys going to the NBA every year from the league. You had some tremendous coaches, Jay Smith at Central Michigan and Coach Hawkins over at Western and Charlie Coles at Miami of Ohio and Stan Heath was at Kent State. Gary Waters was at Kent our first year. I mean, these are names that, went on to be, just tremendous coaches. So we were walking into, really a difficult scenario. Recruiting in Ohio is hard and that had been that had been something that had really separated us from everybody else when we were at Cal PA and Robert Morris. It was our ability to recruit Ohio. And so we tried to maintain that. And I think we did to some degree and had success in Ohio when we were at Eastern. But with that being said, you had all the MAC schools were in Ohio, from Toledo and Miami of Ohio to Dan Dockage over at Bowling Green and Larry Hunter, just unbelievable coach down at Ohio University. And I mean, just Dan Hipsher at Akron. I mean, unbelievable league. So you had that to battle. And then Detroit was just a different animal. And if you weren't from there, it was a really hard place to crack from a recruiting standpoint. And then frankly, once we got in and rolled our sleeves up and got into it, there were some NCAA ramifications. And I don't want to sound like I'm making excuses. These are things you don't know until you get into a job. So we had those things going on. Then you had the 5-8 rule. And a lot of people don't know about that, but the NCAA came out, and it's amazing. The same people who have instituted the transfer portal and where you don't have to have a sit-out rule are the ones that instituted this rule. The same rule they put into place because they thought coaches were running players off and they wanted players to stay in school at one school. That's why the 5-8 rule was instituted. To now, where they
20 years
want them
later,
to go wherever they want to go. So anyway, the 5-8 rule basically said that you can only recruit 5 players in 1 year to fill your roster, or 8 over 2. And so we went in with basically a depleted roster. at Eastern Michigan and had to play that first year with like 5 scholarship players. And, we were sitting out a couple freshmen. And then the second year, we were back to like 4 scholarship players because you had a couple guys that decided to leave. And it was just, we never really got to where we were at full capacity with scholarships until our last year. So that was difficult. But with that being said, Marcus, I thought we did a great job. We put together an unbelievable team. Our fourth year, we were told that if we broke 500, hit 500, that they would roll my contract over. They didn't do it. We ended up finishing 500, had a pretty good year, very competitive, made major steps forward, and they didn't roll it over. There was a change in leadership at the top, and they decided they didn't want to do that, which is their prerogative. So now you basically know you're a lame duck coach going into year 5. And probably, again, not smart on my part, but I was offered a couple of head Division II coaching jobs. Had a couple people call me up, say, hey, our job's coming open. We'd love to have you. And they would have been really good jobs. But I felt too responsible, for lack of a better word, for my coaching staff. People don't ever think about the assistant coaches. What are they going to do? They're not going to be retained, and they're going to be left in the cold. And then our team. And I felt really strongly about our team. And John Bowler, who you mentioned, was a rising sophomore who had played a lot for us as a freshman, and we knew could be a really special player. And so we go into that 5th year, pretty much, I guess, just say, hey, we bet on ourselves. And the next thing you know, we had a couple major upsets, played in the championship game of the Paradise Jam early season tournament, had beaten St. Louis, had beaten Austin Peay, had beaten a couple other pretty good mid-major programs. And we're at home playing Central Michigan. We're 9-4. We're something 3-1, 3-0 in the conference. We're playing for first place in the league. And John injured his back, and he was our starting center, our leading scorer, our leader, and basically the foundation of our program. And so he basically dislocated a disc in his back. So he was out for about the next month, and then he tried to come back with cortisone shots. To make a long story short, we went from being, everything ahead of us to not being a very good basketball team, and suffered through a lot of some growing pains and things that I learned a lot about from a coaching standpoint that I needed to do a better job with. And so anyway, to make a long story short, they didn't renew my contract. So here I am, it's 19 years into my coaching career, and all of a sudden I don't have a job. And so it's when coaching becomes who you are, and, we all preach about, you're not what you do. But coaches, I think, we're kind of a different animal because most of us eat, sleep, drink, and live the game. That's what we do. We're in it because we love our kids. We're in it for our guys. We're in it for our kids. And I've always been in it for my players and will always be in it for my players. So here I am. I don't have a team. It's the first time I haven't had a team in my career. You don't realize how much you think about your team every day and how much sometimes maybe we take our team for granted until you don't have a team.
Well, and that's to your point, right? Like that's the biggest thing I think in terms of not having that title. It's because, like you said, you don't have that team that you're going to invest into, right? And now you're like, what do I do?
And, there's some embarrassment involved, because you take this personal. How can you not take it personal? You just lost your job. There's your family to think about. How am I going to support my family? And then, your ego. And, here I am. I've taken a major hit to what I've prided myself in that I do a really good job with. So had all those factors going on. I was fortunate that I've made some really good friends during my tenure at Eastern Michigan. I'd gotten to know Bo Schembechler a little bit, the legendary football coach at University of Michigan. Tommy Amaker had become someone I'd gotten to know. Tom Izzo, someone I'd gotten to know. And so I got some opportunities to go and become a Division I coach as an assistant. And Coach Meyer, frankly, thought that's what I needed to do. Because I reached out to him for advice, and he was like, "Hey, you need to go back to Division I, be an assistant for a year or two, and then you're going to be able to jump right back into the Division I level. You're too good a coach. You've done too good a job." But I had a son, my oldest son, Jimmy, who wanted to play for me, and he would have came to Eastern Michigan and been a walk-on on our team, but he wasn't good enough to play at that level. But he was good enough to be a very effective Division II player. And so we sat down as a family and said, you know what? Let's go back to Division II. We were really happy at Division II. Marcus, the one thing I really felt like at Division I that I didn't like, and I experienced this both at Robert Morris and Eastern Michigan, is the amount of time that you've got to spend recruiting and promoting your program to your boosters, alums, and supporters is just insurmountable. You just can't, I can't even put it in words how much time that takes away from your family and from coaching your basketball team. And kudos to the guys who have done it for so long, like the Coach Izzos, who have been so great at it. But I felt like, when I was Division II, I really got to invest in my guys, my team, my players, be around my players, the chance to coach them and to involve my family with our team. And that had always been a big part of our time at Cal PA was my wife and my sons were always around our team. And so we made a decision to go back to Division II, and I took the Tusculum job. I was very fortunate that Ed Hoffmeyer, the AD there, was able to see past me being a Division I coach. There were a lot of Division II guys that didn't want to hire a guy like myself who had just left the Division I program because they were fearful that you'll stay for a year or two and bolt right back to Division I. And so I give him my word that I'll be here a minimum of 5 years. I guarantee you that. I'm gonna sink my, put both feet down and be where my feet are, and we're gonna build this thing, and we're gonna build it together. And so he took a chance on me, and that's what we did at Tusculum. And I ended up coaching my son all 4 years. He played for us at Tusculum, still holds a couple school records, was an outstanding player for us, helped take us to the NCAA tournament for the second time in school history, and was a part of some really good teams and some other good players on those teams that we were blessed to coach. And I, couldn't have been happier for that opportunity.
And he also helped coach after, right?
He graduated and became a GA for us. And then when I moved to Delta State, was our GA there. I actually, it looks like I bounced around all these places, but I went to Tusculum and loved it there and would have stayed there, but had a chance, got a phone call from West Virginia Wesleyan, which was right in my backyard in the same league that I grew up playing in and coached in. And Ken Tyler was the AD there, good friend today. And I ended up taking that job thinking I was going to be, back home. And after I'd been there for a year, there was just some things that Ken wanted to do, I wanted to do, and it was obviously we weren't going to be able to do those things. But above and beyond that, I had interviewed at the University of New Orleans when I was at Tusculum, and Amy Champion had been the AD there. And Amy and I had a great relationship. And when the Delta State job came open, she called me and said, listen, you need to go after this job. It's exactly what you want to do. She had played there and won a national title on the women's side. To make a long story short, I ended up down in Mississippi for the first time ever, coaching at Delta State. And Jimmy was our GA and part-time there because they have that the state of Mississippi is very strong nepotism. And unless you're going to pay a family member from an outside source, which is how the major college guys do it, they wouldn't allow me to hire him, which is why I ended up going to Fort Smith 7 years later because Jimmy had been working for me, and he would work at a car lot for half a day, just doing whatever he could do. I'd sat him down and said, listen, you've got to move. You've got to take a job. And then when the AD at Fort Smith called me and said, listen, I know your son is, works for you. I'll hire him if you'll take the job. And so that's what led to the Fort Smith deal. But So anyway, it's been a great run. We've really enjoyed it. I'm so blessed right now to be at Missouri Valley. I work for an unbelievable president. I was hired by a great AD. She has since retired. She was tremendous, one of the best ADs I've ever worked for. We just hired a tremendous AD that I'm excited to continue to build this with, and we're just really blessed to be here at Missouri Valley.
Well, I think it's interesting. You mentioned about, well, I know, look at my resume, it looks like I've jumped around a lot, but I think there's always a story to things, though, too, right? It's different if you're just jumping to jump to jump, but if there's stories behind it where it's like family and this and that, and, I think in some ways, right, like your resume is probably all over the place if you stay in Division I, right? Because like there's so much volatility there where, like you mentioned with Division II, and I love how you said that, right? Like there was time with your players and time with your family, and there was more of a schedule to it and everything like that. Right before Missouri Valley, you were at Greensboro in Division III, and what was, that was your one stint in Division III. What was, kind of your interest, or what did you learn from that in terms of coaching guys who literally were there for an academic scholarship at best?
So the first year I was there, really loved it. Kind of came as Heather Macy was the women's coach there, former Division I women's coach, and she's now coaching, I think, at Nova Southeastern Division II. But she was the women's coach there, was assistant AD, and was very instrumental in convincing me I was going to retire. I was leaving Fort Smith to retire, which is a whole nother story we don't need to get into, but I was leaving there to retire. Jimmy got the job at Roger State and has continued to do a great job there, and is now their associate head coach at Roger State. Those guys do a tremendous job. Justin Barkley, their head coach, is awesome and has given Jimmy a ton of responsibility. And we're literally 4 hours away from him here. So it's been great for our families to be able to reconnect. Jimmy's daughter, our granddaughter, is going to be 5 here in a few days. And, trust me, she's got both my wife and I wrapped around her finger. So anyway, Heather was very responsible, Coach Macy, for me getting there. Worked for an AD that I loved, Kim Strabel. After a year, he decided to retire. Now, going back, though, that year, we inherited a team that I don't think they'd had a winning season like in 12, 13 years. They hadn't been to the tournament in forever. To make a long story short, we had a winning year. We had to battle a lot. Just all the things you battle when you go in. And I think it's even harder at Division III because you're inheriting a full roster. It's not like you're bringing in your own guys. And, we had a lot of guys that just didn't want to believe, so to speak. But we battled through that and we won them over, and we ended up having an unbelievable year and finished, I think, second or third in the league and played for a league title and played in the championship game for the first time like in 20 some years. So just that was great. The part of it that wasn't great that I didn't like about Division III, and no slam on Division III, because it has its merits and its values, but you just can't spend any time around your team. You can't coach them till and that first year we couldn't coach them till like October 15th. You get like 2 weeks and then you're playing games. And then as soon as your season ends, it's done. You can't do anything with them. And it is truly a player driven, but when you're, player led, but when you're stepping in to start a program, it makes it really difficult because your players don't know what to do until they've been through it with you for a year. So that part of it was really hard. I didn't like the lack of connection that I had with our guys, the ability to spend teaching time on the court. And let's be real here. Nobody cares if you're the music teacher and you've got people that want to come in and spend extra time doing what they love to do, play the flute or the trombone or whatever it is. But here it is, as the basketball coach, you can't spend time on the court coaching your team. And where is it that we have the greatest connection in doing the thing that we love? Players loving to play and coaches loving to teach. And so that was really difficult for me. That was a difficult transition. Enjoyed my time. Greensboro's a great place, but yeah, that was difficult.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you, Coach Boone, sitting down. Like you mentioned, I mean, over 40 years as a head coach, over 600 wins. I guess last question to follow up, which I think is something that a lot of coaches in some ways, maybe it's just me and I've gotten better at it, can struggle with, is How do you intentionally stay in touch with your players after all these years? I mean, you're mentioning guys that, again, you're talking about the early days where you're at Cal U and you're mentioning guys off the top of your head like it's nothing. Like, how do you stay in touch with those guys?
It's amazing, Marcus. Through the course of all these years, you have certain guys who were a part of your program that are just naturally born connectors. They connect all the pieces, all the different personalities and people together. And those guys have probably done a tremendous job of just maintaining contact with myself and serving as kind of a bridge with the players. But there's nothing better. I'm being, like yesterday, I had one of my guys that I had at Greensboro, called me and wanted to know if I could, put in a recommendation for him to go to physical therapy school. But he's doing that, because he's just graduated. I love doing those things. You get a guy that's getting married, wants to know if you can come to his wedding, or wants to let you know what's going on, the firstborn, and then these guys, those guys from Cal, those guys from Robert Morris. Right now on my staff here at Missouri Valley, Steve Napper, who was one of the guys I inherited at Robert Morris and I coached for 2 years, is here on my staff. Steve's, I think, 51 years old, a retired state police officer, and is serving on our coaching staff and
That's
doing
what
a
it's all
great
about,
job.
right?
Yeah. So, the connectors have really helped. Social media obviously that's a positive of social media. It's really provided an opportunity to stay in touch with your guys and see how they're doing. And then, through the years, I've had some special guys that have played for us and have just done a great job of staying in touch with us over the years.
That's phenomenal. Well, Coach Boone, like I said, can't appreciate you enough jumping on the pod, telling your story, giving back to the game as long as you have, and obviously wish you best of luck coming up here this season with Missouri Valley.
I appreciate that, and I hope you don't mind me doing this. I always say this, and usually it's more of a technical coaching clinic, but my cell number is 479-755-7349. Any coaches have questions or things I can help them with, don't hesitate to call. If I don't answer, please leave a message or send me a text, because I don't answer if I don't know it right off the bat. And my personal email, which is the best way to get me, is just coach.boone@outlook.com. Coach.boone@outlook.com. And always happy to connect with coaches, help coaches. And certainly if anybody out there has some pretty good players, we'd love to get those too. So, Marcus, thank you. I really appreciate what you're doing here and what you're doing with the podcast. I think it's a great way to get a message out to coaches and support our profession. And thank you so much for all you do.
Well, I appreciate the kind words.